She had been moving through the restaurant for hours, her feet aching and her arms tired from carrying trays that seemed heavier than the last. The clatter of plates, the hum of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter, all of it blended into a constant background noise she had learned to live with. Most of the time, she felt invisible, like a shadow moving across a stage where everyone else was the star. She smiled at customers, refilled their water glasses, cleared crumbs from the tables, and made polite conversation, but inside, a part of her was elsewhere, somewhere quiet. Where music existed, her apron was stained in places from long days of work, and the name tag on her chest had grown a bit crooked. She adjusted it quickly, not wanting her manager to notice, and hurried over to a table where a group of people were chatting loudly. They barely looked at her, more absorbed in each other than the meal in front of them. She refilled their drinks with practiced ease, smiled, and stepped back. It was a small victory when she didn't trip over a chair or bump into someone's elbow. Those little victories made her day bearable. She moved on to the next table, her mind drifting back to her childhood. She could still remember the way the piano felt under her fingers, how the keys seemed to respond to her emotions in a way no one ever could. She had spent hours practicing, imagining herself performing on stage, her music carrying people away. But life had a way of pulling her in different directions. Family responsibilities, money troubles, and the need to survive pushed the piano into a corner, and she hadn't touched it in years. She tried to tell herself that it was just a hobby she had outgrown, but deep down, she knew it was more than that. It had been a part of her identity, something that defined who she was beyond the apron and the trays. The restaurant was crowded tonight. The smell of cooked food hung in the air, mingling with the scent of coffee and the faint perfume of the customers. She weaved through the tables, balancing a tray of desserts, smiling politely as she placed each one down. She noticed the way some people glanced at her, barely registering her presence, and she felt a familiar pang of frustration. It wasn't that she wanted attention, but she longed for acknowledgement, for someone to see more than the uniform and the tired expression on her face. During a brief lull between orders, she leaned against the counter and took a deep breath. Her body ached, and her mind felt tired, but there was a spark inside her that refused to be extinguished. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining herself at the piano again. She could hear the notes in her head, soft at first, then growing stronger, filling a room with sound and emotion. For a second, she allowed herself to forget the bustling restaurant around her and step into that world. It was dangerous, she thought, to get lost in a dream when reality demanded so much. But the music called to her anyway. Her manager called her name, snapping her back to the present. She straightened her back, wiped the sweat from her forehead, and hurried over. There were more tables to serve, more orders to take, more plates to carry. She moved with practiced efficiency, but her mind was still half with the piano, imagining the touch of the keys, the feel of the music flowing through her. She smiled at a young couple who were arguing quietly over their dessert. She laughed softly at their little quarrel, feeling a strange kinship with them. Everyone had their own battles, their own frustrations, and their own dreams. She just happened to carry hers in silence. As the night wore on, the restaurant began to thin out. The noise level dropped, replaced by the occasional clink of a glass or the soft scrape of a chair being pushed back. She moved more slowly now, her energy waning, her muscles protesting after hours of constant motion. She caught sight of herself in the reflection of a window and barely recognized the person staring back. Tired eyes, messy hair, a uniform marked by the day's work. She sighed quietly, wishing she could be someone else for a while. Someone free from responsibilities, someone who could just sit down and play without worry. She remembered the first time she had sat at a piano in her childhood. She had been small, unsure, but drawn to the keys like a moth to a flame. The first notes she played were shaky, uncertain, but they carried a spark that she hadn't felt anywhere else. Her parents had smiled, encouraged her, and for a while she had believed that she could make something of her talent. But life had other plans. Bills needed to be paid, work needed to be done, and the piano became a reminder of a path she could no longer follow. Still, the memory lingered. A quiet voice in her heart telling her that the music was never truly gone. Back in the restaurant, she moved through the remaining tables with quiet determination. A few customers thanked her, some barely looked at her, but she didn't let it affect her. She had learned long ago that her worth wasn't measured by how others saw her. Still, the longing for something more gnawed at her. The world outside the restaurant felt distant, unreachable, but the music in her mind was close, almost tangible, like it was waiting for her to return. Cleaning up after the last of the customers left, she found herself near the corner of the restaurant where a piano had been tucked away for events and private gatherings. It was an old upright, polished and waiting, as if it knew she would eventually notice it. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, feeling the cool surface, and a shiver ran down her spine. The restaurant was empty now, the noise gone, leaving only the faint hum of the lights and the distant sound of traffic outside. She closed her eyes and let her fingers touch the keys, pressing lightly, almost reverently. The sound was soft, imperfect, but it was enough to remind her of everything she had almost forgotten. For a moment, she imagined herself performing. People listening, eyes wide with wonder, hearts moved by something she had created. The thought made her smile, a real smile that reached her eyes. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. The fatigue in her body was still there, but it didn't matter. She was reminded that even in the most ordinary moments, even while wearing an apron and carrying trays, a part of her could still shine. The night wore on, and she reluctantly stepped away from the piano, returning to her duties of cleaning and organizing for the next day. But the spark remained, a quiet promise that the music was still inside her, waiting for the right moment. She knew that life wouldn't suddenly change, that bills would still need to be paid and shifts worked. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. The music was real, and so was she, as she turned off the lights and locked the restaurant door behind her. She took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill her lungs. The city was quiet now, the streets emptying, and she felt a strange sense of freedom. She walked home slowly, savoring the stillness, letting her mind drift to melodies she hadn't touched in years. Tomorrow would bring another shift, more trays, more invisible moments. But the piano would still be there, waiting, and so would she, ready to reclaim a part of herself that had never truly left in that quiet. In that moment between work and rest, she realized something important. Life might demand her presence in the restaurant. I'd see her as just another server, but she had something no one could take away. She had music, talent, and a spirit that refused to be confined. And one day, she thought, one day soon, that part of her would step fully into the light again, even as she walked home that night. The sounds of the city surrounded her, but her mind was elsewhere. She remembered the first piano lesson she had ever taken, sitting on the small wooden bench in the corner of a bright sunlit room. Her fingers had been clumsy, hitting wrong notes more than the right ones, but she had loved every sound. The teacher had smiled at her persistence and encouraged her to keep trying. She had been small, but full of hope, believing that one day she could make the piano sing the way she felt inside. Her parents had worked hard, and they supported her in their own quiet ways. They didn't understand music the way she did, but they saw the joy it brought her. Money had always been tight, and every piano lesson had been a sacrifice. Still, those moments were pure, and she carried them with her like a treasure no one could take away. She remembered staying up late at night practicing scales, learning songs from her favorite composers, and feeling a sense of accomplishment with each small victory. The piano had been her world, a place where she could be herself without worry or fear. But life was not gentle, and as time passed, responsibilities grew heavier. Her parents' health, bills, and the need to contribute to the household forced her to put aside her piano dreams. Each year that passed, the piano sat untouched, gathering dust, waiting for a day that never seemed to come. She told herself that she would return one day, that it was never too late, but the doubt crept in slowly, making her wonder if she had lost her touch forever. Even now, as she moved through the crowded streets, she could hear the faint echo of music in her mind. It wasn't a full song, just fragments of melodies she had loved as a child. The memory of those notes was enough to make her heart ache and smile at the same time. She wondered if anyone else could understand that feeling, the longing for something beautiful that had been set aside. The knowledge that it was still a part of you, even when life demanded you to be someone else. At home, she settled into her small apartment, the walls bare except for a few pictures and notes pinned to a corkboard. She made herself a simple dinner, eating slowly, her mind still on the piano. The apartment was quiet, the only sound coming from the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional distant siren. She imagined the feel of the piano keys under her fingers, the vibration of the notes through her hands, and she sighed, wishing it wasn't just a memory. She longed to hear the music again, not just in her mind, but filling a room, reaching people's hearts. Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams filled with music and memories. She dreamed of performing on stage, of people listening, and being moved by something she had created. In the dream, she felt free, alive in a way that her everyday life didn't allow. She woke up with the lingering warmth of those dreams, carrying a quiet sense of hope into the morning. Even if it was just a whisper, the music inside her had not disappeared. The next day at work was no different than any other. She moved between tables, refilled drinks, cleared plates, and smiled at people who barely noticed her presence. Her body ached, her feet throbbed, but her mind was alert, remembering the dreams from the night before. She noticed small details. She usually overlooked the way a child laughed at the table next to her, the soft conversation between two elderly customers, the way the sunlight hit the counter just so. These little things reminded her that the world was still full of beauty, even if she didn't always see it. During a short break, she found herself near the piano again. The restaurant had been quiet in the early afternoon. She allowed herself a moment to run her fingers lightly across the keys. The sound was soft, imperfect, but it sparked something in her chest, a feeling she hadn't felt in years. Memories flooded back, lessons with her first teacher, the songs she had practiced for hours, the applause in her mind that had never materialized in reality. She closed her eyes, letting herself imagine a small audience, their eyes wide with wonder, their hearts touched by her music. The day passed slowly, filled with the usual motions, but her mind kept drifting back to the piano. She wondered what it would feel like to play a full piece again, to let her emotions flow freely without the constraints of work, responsibilities, or fear. The thought both terrified and excited her. What if she wasn't good enough anymore? What if she had lost the skill that had once defined her? But deep down she knew that the music had never truly left her. It was still inside, waiting for her courage to return. That evening, after the restaurant had quieted down and the last customers had left, she stayed behind to clean and organize. The piano sat quietly in the corner, almost inviting her to come closer. She ran her fingers over the keys, testing the sound, and a small smile tugged at her lips. She played a few simple notes, carefully at first, then allowed herself to remember the pieces she had loved. Each note brought a memory, a feeling, a small piece of herself that had been hidden away for too long. She remembered the first time she had performed in front of people. At a small recital when she was a child, her hands had trembled, her heart had raced, but the music had carried her beyond the fear. She had felt alive in a way that nothing else could replicate. That feeling had stayed with her, even through years of struggle and sacrifice. And now, as she sat at the piano once more, she felt that same spark. It was faint, fragile, but it was enough to remind her that she was capable of more than she allowed herself to believe. Hours passed without her noticing. She played softly, exploring melodies she had forgotten, discovering little variations that made her feel like herself again. The restaurant was empty, the lights dimmed, but she didn't care. She was lost in the music, in the memory of who she had been and who she could still become. Each note carried her further from the world of trays and orders, deeper into a world where she could be free. As she finally stepped away from the piano, her hands sore but her heart full, she realized something important. The piano wasn't just an instrument. It was a bridge to her own spirit, a reminder of her dreams, her passions, and her identity. Life had demanded her attention in other ways, but it could never take this from her. She could always return, always play, always let the music speak when words were not enough. She cleaned up and prepared to leave, her mind buzzing with ideas and melodies. The streets outside were quiet, the night air cool against her skin. She walked home slowly, savoring the feeling of possibility. The music had returned, even if only for a moment, and it reminded her that she was not defined by her circumstances. She carried her dreams inside her, fragile but alive, waiting for the right time to shine again. That night, she dreamed again, but this time the dreams were brighter, filled with light and sound, with applause she could almost hear. She felt hope stirring in her chest, a quiet determination that this was only the beginning. The piano, once a symbol of what she had lost, was now a beacon of what she could reclaim. She fell asleep with a smile on her face, ready to face another day, knowing that the music inside her was waiting, patient and unwavering. For the moment, she would finally let it take over. The morning started like any other, with the sound of the alarm pulling her from sleep and the soft hum of the city outside her window. She stretched, feeling the lingering soreness in her arms and shoulders from the night before. But despite the fatigue, there was a small sense of excitement in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. The piano had reminded her of what she had been missing, and now it lingered in her thoughts like a quiet promise. At work, the restaurant buzzed with activity. Orders were being called out, coffee machines hissed, and waiters moved quickly across the polished floors. She slipped into her uniform, adjusted her apron, and pushed her tiredness aside. Her movements were practiced, fluid, almost automatic. She greeted the regulars with smiles and remembered the details they preferred in their meals and drinks. Her presence was efficient and unnoticed, as usual. But her mind kept wandering back to the piano tucked in the corner of the dining area. A manager approached her with news about a special event being held that evening. A local charity group had rented out a section of the restaurant, and they requested live music to accompany dinner. Her heart skipped a beat when she realized that a piano would be set up in the middle of the dining room. She felt a mix of fear and hope. She had never performed in front of strangers as an adult, and yet the thought of playing for a real audience sent a thrill through her. The day dragged slowly, each hour stretching longer than the last. Her movements remained precise, but inside she was counting the minutes, imagining what it would feel like to sit at the piano again. She could picture the polished keys, the smooth surface under her fingers, the sound filling the room. Her mind played out melodies she hadn't touched in years, tentative at first, then gradually more confident. She felt a small spark of anticipation, as if the universe was offering her a chance she could no longer ignore. In the early afternoon, she snuck a moment alone in the quiet restaurant. She approached the piano, brushing her hands over the keys lightly, and then pressed a note. The sound startled her at first, sharp and real, but soon it became familiar, and she allowed her fingers to move across the keys. Testing chords, running through scales, and remembering the flow of music. She felt a rush of emotion, a combination of nostalgia, excitement, and fear. Could she still do this? Could she play well enough to make people stop and listen? Her thoughts were interrupted by the delivery of flowers for the event. The florist carried them in, arranging them carefully on the tables. She watched for a moment, taking note of the small details, the way the petals caught the light, the colors that complemented the decor, the scent that filled the air. It reminded her of the subtle beauty in small things. The way music could transform an ordinary moment into something extraordinary. The piano, the flowers, the gentle buzz of activity, all of it felt like a stage set for a story that was about to unfold. As evening approached, the restaurant filled with guests. People laughed and talked, servers moved briskly between tables, and the atmosphere became more formal and energetic. She felt the weight of her nerves pressing against her chest, but she focused on her breathing, steadying herself. The piano sat ready, its polished surface gleaming under the soft lights. She could see the curiosity of a few early guests as they glanced at the instrument, and her heart quickened. This was it. A moment she had waited for, though she hadn't known it would arrive like this. The manager whispered instructions to her, explaining that the charity organizers wanted live music to start the evening. She nodded, her throat dry, and walked slowly toward the piano. Each step felt heavier than the last, her mind racing with doubts and fears. What if she forgot everything? What if she played poorly? What if no one listened? But beneath the fear, there was a quiet determination. This was her chance, and she could not turn away. She sat on the bench, her hands hovering over the keys. The room grew quieter as people noticed her presence. Waiters paused in the background, and some guests turned to watch. The air felt charged, and for the first time in years, she felt the familiar tingle of anticipation that only music could bring. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memory of her childhood lessons, her secret practice sessions, and the hours of dreaming wash over her. Then she began to play, softly at first, finding the familiar rhythm that had always lived inside her. The first notes were tentative, a whisper of what was to come. Her fingers trembled slightly, but soon they found their strength. The melody grew, filling the room with sound, wrapping around the laughter and conversation, commanding attention without force. Guests paused, forks halfway to their mouths, eyes turning toward her. She felt the music flow through her, guiding her fingers, lifting her spirit, revealing a part of herself that had been hidden for so long. She played songs that carried memories, emotions, and stories. Each chord resonated with honesty, each note a reflection of years spent longing, practicing in secret, and dreaming quietly. The room seemed to respond, the energy shifting from casual chatter to rapt attention. People leaned in, some with tears in their eyes, others with smiles that spoke of recognition and awe. She had not expected such a response, and yet it felt natural, as if the music had always belonged in this space, as if she had always belonged to it. Her confidence grew with each passing moment. She remembered the small triumphs of her past, the recitals, the lessons, the private moments of triumph over her own self-doubt. Those experiences, long buried, returned to her hands and her heart. She allowed herself to play more freely, experimenting with the tempo, exploring the depth of each melody. The piano became an extension of herself, a voice for everything she had felt and endured. Some guests whispered to each other, amazed at the unexpected talent before them. Others simply listened in silence, captivated by the sincerity of the performance. She could sense the collective emotion in the room, a shared connection that transcended words. For a few magical moments, she was not just a server, not just a woman carrying responsibilities and fatigue. She was an artist, a storyteller, soul speaking through music. The manager watched from a distance, astonished at the transformation. He had known her as a diligent and reliable employee, but he had never seen this side of her. The piano, which had once been an unnoticed fixture in the corner, was now a stage, and she had claimed it with a courage that left everyone present in awe. She continued to play, not for recognition, but because it was what she was meant to do. The joy of the music, the response of the audience, and the connection she felt filled her with a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known in years. As the final notes faded, there was a moment of silence, a collective holding of breath before the room erupted in applause. People stood, some clapping enthusiastically, others whispering words of praise. She smiled, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, overwhelmed by the sheer emotion of the moment. The piano had transformed the room, and in doing so it had transformed her. She felt alive in a way she had not felt for decades, her spirit renewed, her confidence restored. The evening continued, but the energy had shifted. Guests were more attentive, conversations lighter, laughter richer. She returned to her duties, but a new lightness accompanied her steps. The music had broken through the invisible walls she had built around herself, and for the first time she felt seen not just as a server, but as a person with talent, depth, and passion. The piano, which had been a silent witness to her past, had become the instrument of her reawakening. Later that night, as the restaurant emptied and the last guest departed, she sat alone for a moment, letting the echoes of the performance linger. Her hands still tingled from the touch of the keys, her heart full with the memory of connection and emotion. She knew that life would return to its routines, that work would continue, and that responsibilities would not vanish. But something had changed. A door had opened, and she had stepped through it, rediscovering a part of herself she had thought lost. She packed her things slowly, savoring the quiet of the empty restaurant. The piano sat silently, gleaming under the dim lights, waiting for the next moment, the next opportunity to speak. She ran her fingers across the keys one last time, a gentle farewell for the night, and stepped out into the cool air. The city was quiet, the streets dimly lit, and she walked home with a new sense of purpose. The music inside her was alive, patient, and waiting, and she was ready to embrace it, knowing that one unexpected chance had reminded her of who she truly was and what she was capable of becoming. The evening was alive with anticipation. Guests had begun to settle into their seats, talking quietly as the lights dimmed slightly, casting a warm glow across the tables. The aroma of food and wine filled the room, but beneath it all, there was a quiet hum of expectancy. The piano sat at the corner, gleaming, waiting for someone to awaken its voice. She approached it slowly, heart racing, hands trembling slightly. This was the moment she had been waiting for, though she hadn't known it would arrive like this as she sat on the bench. She took a deep breath and let her fingers hover over the keys. The room seemed to hold its breath with her. People turned to watch, curious, uncertain what to expect from the quiet server who had been moving among them unnoticed all evening. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memories of her childhood lessons, the secret practice sessions, and the years of longing wash over her. Then she began to play softly at first, almost like a whisper testing the waters, feeling the instrument respond to her touch. The first notes were tentative, but as they flowed, her confidence grew. She remembered the rhythm of the pieces she loved, the feeling of each chord, the rise and fall of the melody. Her hands moved more freely now, guided by instinct and memory, allowing the music to take over. The room began to change. Conversations slowed, heads turned, and the soft sounds of the piano filled every corner. Wrapping around people like a gentle embrace, she played pieces that told stories. Melodies that spoke of joy, sorrow, hope, and longing. Each note carried emotion, and she poured herself into every chord, every phrase. The audience was captivated. They had come expecting background music, something pleasant, but not this. The depth of her performance drew them in, and soon the restaurant was silent except for the piano. Even the waiters paused, trays in hand, watching as the server transformed into an artist before their eyes. Her mind was fully in the music now. She was no longer thinking about her uniform, her tired feet, or the hours she had worked that day. She was lost in the melody, letting it guide her fingers and heart. Memories of past performances, of lessons and late-night practices came alive again. She remembered the first time she had played for an audience as a child, the trembling excitement, the rush of accomplishment. That feeling returned now, stronger than ever, but refined by years of struggle and perseverance. Some guests were visibly moved, leaning forward, eyes glistening, faces softening with emotion. Others whispered quietly to each other, surprised at the depth of talent that had been hidden in plain sight all this time. She could sense the collective energy in the room, the shared experience of witnessing something unexpected and beautiful. It was a rare and precious moment, connection between performer and audience that transcended words. Her fingers danced across the keys, exploring variations she had never dared to try before. She experimented with tempo, dynamics, and expression, allowing the music to evolve naturally. Each note carried intention, each phrase told a story, and she felt a sense of freedom that she hadn't known in years. The piano became an extension of herself, a voice for everything she had felt, endured, and dreamed of. Time seemed to blur. Minutes stretched, and the audience remained captivated, suspended in the beauty of the performance. She felt the music flowing through her, lifting her spirit, and revealing a part of herself that had been hidden for far too long. She no longer worried about mistakes or judgment. She was fully present, fully alive, and fully herself. As the final notes approached, she allowed the music to swell, filling the room with a crescendo of emotion. The last chord lingered, resonating through the space, and for a moment there was complete silence. Then the room erupted into applause. Guests stood, clapping enthusiastically, some with tears in their eyes, others smiling broadly. She felt a rush of emotion, tears welling in her eyes, as the reality of what she had just done sank in. She had not only played, she had connected, touched hearts, reminded herself of the power of her own talent. The manager approached her, astonished, a wide smile on his face. He had known her as a diligent and capable server, but he had never seen this side of her. The piano, which had been a quiet fixture in the corner, had become a stage, and she had claimed it with courage and grace. She felt a surge of pride, not just for the performance, but for herself, for daring to step into a role she had long abandoned, for trusting her instincts, and for allowing her true self to shine. Guests came forward, complimenting her, expressing amazement, and asking how long she had been playing. She smiled, feeling shy but proud, and simply replied that it had been a part of her life for many years. They nodded, understanding, as if they could feel the depth of her journey through the music she had shared. The room was alive with energy, transformed from a place of ordinary dining into a space of shared emotion, memory, and beauty. Even after the applause subsided, the impact lingered. People returned to their conversations, but there was a new lightness in the air, a sense of wonder that had not been there before. She returned to her duties, but she moved differently now. There was a quiet confidence in her steps, a subtle grace in her movements, and a newfound awareness of the power she carried within herself. The piano had reminded her in the most vivid way that she was more than her circumstances, more than the uniform and the trays. She was an artist, a creator, and a person capable of touching others in ways that mattered. Later, as the restaurant emptied and the night quieted, she lingered by the piano, running her fingers lightly across the keys one last time. The echoes of the evening's performance filled the empty space, a reminder of what had been achieved. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the audience, but for herself, for having taken the risk, for trusting in her talent, and for reclaiming a part of her identity that had been dormant for too long. Walking home through the quiet streets, she felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. The city around her seemed softer, gentler, alive with possibilities. She knew that life would return to its routines, that work would continue, and that responsibilities would not disappear. But something fundamental had changed. She had discovered that the courage to embrace her talent, to step into the light, could transform not only her life, but the lives of those around her. She carried that knowledge with her, a quiet flame that would not be extinguished. At home, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the years of secret practice, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt and longing. Each step had led to this evening, this one shining moment where her music had bridged the gap between dream and reality. She realized that the piano was not just an instrument, but a doorway to her own potential, a reminder of what she could achieve when she trusted herself as she prepared for bed. Her hands still tingling from the evening, she allowed herself to dream again. The dreams were brighter now, filled with music, applause, and connection. She could imagine future performances, new opportunities, and the possibility of sharing her gift with the world. The piano had opened a path she had thought lost, and she knew that she would walk it with courage and determination. She fell asleep with a sense of contentment and anticipation, knowing that the journey was far from over. The evening had been a turning point, a moment that reminded her of the power of perseverance, passion, and belief in oneself. The music was no longer a hidden part of her life. It had returned fully, alive, and ready to guide her toward new beginnings. And as she slept, she dreamed not just of music, but of a future where she could fully embrace the talent and spirit that had always been a part of her. Waiting for the right moment to shine, the next morning she woke with a sense of quiet triumph. The memory of last night's performance was fresh, alive in her mind like a song she could play over and over. The applause, the faces of the guests, the feeling of being truly seen, all of it had left a mark that would not fade easily. She sat on the edge of her bed, her hands resting on her lap, remembering the way the music had carried her, the way she had felt free and powerful, and she allowed herself a small smile. Her life had not magically changed overnight. She still had responsibilities, bills to pay, and shifts to work. But something had shifted inside her, a recognition that she was more than the sum of her circumstances. She carried with her a renewed sense of purpose, a spark that had been reignited by the piano and the courage she had shown herself. She knew now that her talent was not something she had to hide or forget. It was a part of her identity, one that she could embrace without fear. At work, the atmosphere was different. She moved through the restaurant with her usual efficiency, but there was a lightness to her step, a quiet confidence in her movements. She greeted customers with genuine warmth, noticing details she had overlooked before. The kitchen staff, her colleagues, and the manager seemed to notice a change as well. There was an aura around her now, subtle but unmistakable, a sense that something remarkable had happened and that it had transformed her. During a brief lull, she found herself near the piano again. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, remembering the performance, the connection, the joy. It was not about perfection or impressing anyone now. It was about reclaiming a part of herself that had long been dormant. She played a few simple notes, letting the sound fill the empty space around her, feeling the same thrill she had felt the night before. It was a private moment, intimate and personal, a reminder that her music was hers and hers alone. The day continued, and word began to spread among the regulars and staff about her performance the night before. Guests who had been present expressed their admiration, complimenting her and sharing how moved they had been by the music. Some visitors asked if she would play again, and though she felt a mix of shyness and pride, she nodded, realizing that this was a new chapter in her life. Her talent, once hidden and unacknowledged, had found a way to speak for itself. People were eager to listen. She began to consider what this could mean for her future. Perhaps she could find opportunities to perform, to share her gift with others beyond the walls of the restaurant. The thought was both exciting and daunting. Life had taught her that dreams required courage, persistence, and sometimes sacrifice. But she felt ready now, strengthened by the experience and the validation that her music was meaningful, that it could touch others in profound ways. The following weeks brought small changes. She continued her work at the restaurant, balancing her duties with moments of musical exploration. She discovered that she could integrate her passion into her daily life, finding spaces and times to practice, to experiment, and to grow. The piano became a constant companion, a source of comfort and inspiration. She even began composing simple pieces of her own, weaving memories, emotions, and experiences into melodies that reflected who she had become. Her confidence grew steadily. When new guests arrived, she sometimes played brief pieces to welcome them, feeling a sense of joy and fulfillment as their attention shifted from conversation to music. Colleagues and managers expressed admiration, and she felt a deeper connection to the people around her. The invisible walls that had once separated her from the world were beginning to crumble, replaced by openness, courage, and self-assurance. She also reconnected with her past in meaningful ways. She reached out to her old piano teacher, sharing the story of her return to music. The teacher expressed pride and encouragement, reminding her that talent, once nurtured, could never truly be lost. This connection reinforced her belief that she had made the right choice in embracing her gift again. The sense of continuity, of bridging past and present, strengthened her resolve to pursue music more intentionally. Opportunities gradually began to appear. A local community center asked if she would play at an event, and though she hesitated at first, she agreed. The experience was invigorating. She realized that sharing her talent brought fulfillment not only to herself, but to others as well. Each performance, no matter how small, reinforced the understanding that her abilities were valuable, meaningful, and deserving of attention. She also began to reflect on the journey that had brought her here to years of hiding, sacrifice, of longing. Each step had contributed to her resilience and depth. She realized that the struggles had not diminished her, but had prepared her for this moment of rediscovery. The piano had been waiting patiently, as if it knew she would return when she was ready. And now that she understood that the music was more than just sound. It was a testament to perseverance, hope, and the enduring power of passion. Her life continued to have challenges. It always would, but she faced them differently. She approached each day with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that she carried within her a source of joy, strength, and expression that no circumstance could take away. The piano was not merely an escape. It was a guide, a reminder of what she was capable of achieving. and a beacon of inspiration for the days ahead. Evenings often found her sitting at the piano after work, experimenting with melodies, improvising, and composing small pieces. The act of creating music became a ritual, a way to connect with herself and the world around her. She found that the more she played, the more she understood about her own emotions, her hopes, and her desires. The piano became a mirror, reflecting her inner world and helping her navigate life with clarity and confidence. The transformation was not only internal, but visible to those around her. Colleagues noticed her confidence, guests admired her skill, and she felt a sense of belonging she had not experienced in years. She had moved from invisibility to recognition, not because she sought it, but because she embraced her truth. The music spoke for her, conveying emotions and experiences that words alone could not capture. As the months passed, she began to dream bigger. She considered performing in larger venues, recording her compositions, and even teaching others who wished to learn. The journey was just beginning, and the possibilities felt endless. Each step she took was grounded in the knowledge that she had reclaimed her talent, embraced her passion, and allowed herself to be seen. The piano had given her more than music. It had given her a sense of identity, purpose, and the courage to pursue her dreams. Looking back, she realized that the pivotal moment in the restaurant, when she had first played for an audience as an adult, had been a turning point. It had reminded her that even in ordinary circumstances, extraordinary moments could arise. It had shown her that courage, vulnerability, and authenticity could transform not only her own life, but also the lives of those who witnessed it. The experience had opened doors, restored confidence, and rekindled a long-lost spark that would continue to guide her journey. She knew that life would continue to present challenges and unexpected twists, but she felt prepared to face them. She had discovered that her talent was a constant, a source of strength, and a reminder of her resilience. The piano was no longer a distant dream or a hidden part of her past. It was an integral part of her present and future. Each note she played, each melody she created, reinforced her sense of self and her connection to the world. One quiet evening, after a long day, she sat at the piano and reflected on how far she had come. The room was calm, the only sound the soft tapping of her fingers on the keys. She played slowly, savoring each note, each chord, feeling gratitude for the journey, for the rediscovery, and for the opportunities that lay ahead. She realized that the true power of her music was not in perfection, recognition, or fame, but in the ability to express herself fully and honestly. It was in the connection it created, the emotions it evoked, and the sense of fulfillment it brought. As she finished playing, she leaned back and smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. The journey from serving tables to standing in the light of her talent had been long, challenging, and sometimes uncertain, but it had led her to a place of self-discovery, courage, and joy. The piano had guided her, reminded her of her worth, and opened a door to a future filled with possibility. She knew that no matter what came next, she would carry the lessons, the music, and the strength she had reclaimed, moving forward with confidence, purpose, and the knowledge that one brave moment could indeed change a life forever.